Is this the year that you are going to absolutely change the game for yourself in your business? Are you ready to scale in a big, big way? Here is a way for you to learn the skills that are going to make the difference for you. How to really sell with confidence in every situation and conversation that you come into contact with. And that is by taking the Language of Sales Masterclass. This is my most comprehensive masterclass. It is a deep, deep dive into selling with confidence. You comes with a workbook. There are over 45 scripts in there for you. It will change the way that you communicate. It will change the way that you sell. Selling will become so much easier. Now, registration is now open. You can save $300 when you register. You get access to the training for 60 days. So you get plenty of time to go through the content. You can upgrade to the live Q&A calls. So you get time with me to ask questions so we can tailor everything specific to your business. And I would love to have you come be a part of this class. Now, to register, go to yoursalesmaven.com/Jan Save 300. That's JANSAVE 300. All one word. Go ahead and register for the class now. Cannot wait to serve you there.
Do sales conversations make you feel awkward or pushy? It's time to ditch the outdated salesy strategies. Your guide, Nikki Roush, will show you how to combine kindness with selling skills to meet your prospects where they are, and in the process, how to up-level your influence and income. Learn how to earn business easily and effortlessly. Here's Nikki.
Welcome, and thank you for listening to the Sales Maven Show. I'm your host, Nikki Roush. Today's episode is a part of the Mastering Excellence series. This is a concept that comes from my background in neuro-linguistic programming, where we learn that there is a structure to excellence. And once you understand the structure of how somebody is achieving exceptional results in their business or life, you can take that structure and implement it into your own life or business so that you can get similar results. Today's guest, I'm super excited to say, is Nick Demas. Now, let me tell you a little bit about him in case you don't know him yet. Although, if you're not following him on Instagram, you want to immediately. He's super entertaining. But here's his bio. Nick Demas is a Tony Award-winning Broadway producer, documentary filmmaker, conscious business coach, and manifestation expert with over 15 years of teaching pranayama, which is breathwork yoga. He's giving me the head shake like I said that right. Thank goodness. Yoga and creativity, as well as 30 years in the entertainment industry. He's traveled from the Tony Awards to ashrams and run a multi-million-dollar business in between. Nick guides you to clear blocks and tap into your creative intuition so you can be unapologetically visible and manifest income while making monumental impact. Nick, thank you so much for being here.
I am so honored. Thank you for having me.
I'm so thrilled to have you. We met recently. We have a mutual friend in common who said, I just think you guys should know each other. I was like, well, I like her. She introduces me to cool people. And oh my gosh, I instantly went and checked out your website. And then I started looking at your stuff on Instagram. And I was like, I just want to be your friend because you're so entertaining, charming, and funny.
Well, I'm a little, I don't know what to say to that other than thank you. And the feeling is mutual. Sometimes when you get introduced to people, you're like, you get on the call with them, you're like, but it was so natural and easy with us that when you invited me to come on, it was an absolute heck yes.
I feel like you're taking a real risk by saying yes to me because you're like, what are we doing? Okay, we're going to do something, but I just love that people will say yes to things. I think I'll say yes to things. And I love people who will say yes. Like, I don't know what we're going to do, but hey, I'm in. Let's go.
I think that for me, that's always been a sort of secret to success in a way, is just saying yes. Say yes until you can't say yes, until you have to say no. There comes a point where if you're getting too many asks,
yes,
then you say no. You choose. And now I choose based on sort of the feeling or my intuition or my instinct around somebody. When we met, I knew immediately I would say yes to you.
Oh, thank you.
Whereas somebody else that might have been, let me think about it. Let me sit with it because time is precious.
Yes.
Eventually, right? When you're first starting out in your business or in any industry, really say yes as much as possible until that time comes when you have to say no.
I think that is so well said. And yeah, I like there are so many times where I've said yes to things where I'll be like later, like, what was I thinking? But I always look for like, what could the story be? Like if I get to walk away with some type of a story that I can use when I'm teaching, it's always worth
there's
it.
always a lesson.
There's always a lesson.
Even if it didn't go the way that you had hoped, or even if it's not maybe as fruitful as you might have hoped for, you're going to get a lesson out of it. And so there's something to learn all the time. Also.
Yeah. So before we dive into the topic, I do just want to touch a little bit more around your background because I feel like you gave me this really succinct bio and you've done so many amazing things. So I don't know where to go with this, but I know like you started dancing professionally in your teens. Is that right?
Yeah. My first professional job, I was a teenager. By 19, I was on the road with a Broadway show. Moved to New York right after that. I danced for years, several years. Did the Radio City Christmas Spectacular with the Rockettes.
Oh my goodness. I didn't know that.
It was a nightmare, to be perfectly honest.
I love that there's a behind the scenes.
The girls are so pretty kicking their legs and all of that, but I was one of the dancers and it just wasn't in alignment for me.
Yeah.
So in the show, there is this Nutcracker ballet and people have to wear like animal costumes. And I was a Russian bear. So I have this big Russian bear head on, and the director at the time had you jump from a trampoline onto the stage, and it's a steel stage, right? And you're doing leaps and jumps, and like it was hurting my body even at 20 years old, right?
Yeah.
Now it's a big system. There's like all these grids on the floor, and you have to find your number. And I was like looking for my number because it's massive there and dangerous, honestly, with so many people and so many moving parts. And I was like looking for my number. My bear head was coming down over my eyes. I couldn't see. Tears were rolling down my cheeks because I was so upset.
Oh.
And I had this moment. I got off stage and I took that bear head off and I was like, this is not your life. It's not the life you want to live. And in that moment, I began to change my life and became a director and a choreographer because I was also that person that was looking at the lights and going, well, that's wrong. Why are they wearing that costume? And I would sometimes verbalize it out loud. Of course, directors hated that. Now, of course, I get that later on when I was directing. But yeah, so that was the first. Chapter 1 was dance career.
Yes.
Chapter 2 was director choreographer for plays and musicals. At which point I was hired to run a nonprofit theater company at 28, turning 29. I was at a theater in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, and they fired the artistic director of the theater while I was there directing a show.
Okay.
And the board of directors, the president of the board turned to me and said, will you run the theater while we do a national search? Now, like I said, I'm 28, 29 years old. I think it was turning 29. I was like, what an amazing opportunity, right?
Yeah.
So I said, absolutely. And I spent a year there learning on the job, ultimately how to run a theater. But at the end of that year, they came to me and said, Nick, we've had the best year we've had artistically and financially in a decade. We want you to stay. We don't want to search for anybody. And so I did stay for another 9 years.
Wow.
Now, during that time, I was practicing yoga, meditation. And that period in Oklahoma City, this was 20 years ago, right?
Yeah.
The community only had 2 yoga classes a day in the entire city of Oklahoma. Only 2 yoga classes a day.
Wow.
And one was at 9 a.m. and one was at 5 p.m. Well, I couldn't go to either.
Right.
And I was working.
Yeah.
I got these like old school VHS tapes, and I put them into my VCR, and I would do these yoga practices, and I built a yoga shanty in my backyard, and ultimately I was like, you know what? I need a bit of time off. I was feeling a bit burnt out. And so I took a month off and I went to yoga teacher training. And while I was in teacher training, I was in a meditation. And what came to me was, you don't need a month off. You need to quit your job.
Oh, I just got chills over my whole body when you said that.
Well, you have to understand, you're sitting in meditation and this is the download that comes in. And this
Yeah.
is my response. No, I have health insurance.
Reject.
Yeah. I can't. No, I can't. Because, in the theater world, that kind of stability doesn't come around often, right? Like to have benefits and 401k, and that just doesn't exist, right?
Okay.
Very, very huge jobs with that. But I knew deep down that had to shift. I had to change. And it took me a year, not gonna lie. Didn't happen overnight, but I then gave them a year notice for them to find a replacement. And which began what I call chapter 3, which was Broadway producing. During that final year, I started a production company. I was crazy year of my life where I was producing a show in the West End in London. I was prepping a show for Broadway, working on the development of a show for Broadway, and still running the theater. The miles on the plane.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
And at the end of that year, I left the theater, and 1 year later exactly, the show that I produced on Broadway was on the producing team of won the Tony for Best Musical 1 year later.
Wow.
Which was an amazing transition in retrospect. At the time, it just felt like, because I was just moving, I was just going, I didn't even have time really to enjoy it. And I say that's when the work of my life really began, because I hit this pinnacle of success at 36 years old, 37. And I didn't know what else I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And so that's when I really had to dig in, went further into my yoga practice, went further into really studying of the self and the way my brain works.
Yes.
Yeah. And really digging into what it is that I wanted to do and how I could serve. And that's when teaching began. That's when coaching began. That's when chapter 4 began. I don't know how many chapters I've got. They say it's like a cat, 9 lives. I've used it up at least 4 at this point. So we'll see where it takes me.
Who knows what will come next.
And
tell
now
us
I have a business.
Yeah, I was going to say, tell us a little bit more about the business that you have now.
Yeah, so it's under one umbrella.
Yeah.
I call it the media company, but I have both consulting for theater producing. So I'm executive producing a Broadway show that's moving in development towards Broadway right now. I have 2 documentaries that are in production. One is complete, and one is on its way, that I directed and produced. And then I have a coaching arm of the business, the education arm, that really is about helping people, as you sort of said in the bio, use their story to manifest, to create in the world, to create abundance, because people connect with people. And the more that you can get yourself out there unapologetically about who you are going to draw in and attract people. And that's really what I do, is I help people get past those blocks and use their innate talents and gifts to manifest, to create in the world.
Which is super, so interesting to me. And before we again, I really am going to get through some of these questions, because the topic that we want to talk about is one of the things, just from hearing his story, I don't think you're going to be surprised. The thing I most wanted to dig in, well, I could go in a lot of directions, is how do you merge these multiple passions that you have into one business? Because I get this question fairly often with people where they're like, so I have this side of myself and I have this other side, and I don't know how to make the 2 things work and combine. And yet you have really done this, and you've built this very successful business doing it. But I do want to ask you one question before I go into there, which is when you're talking about blocks and you're talking about your story, the thing that comes to mind for me, and so I just would love to hear if you're willing to share, and we can cut it if you don't want to, is one of the biggest blocks about being vulnerable and really sharing. Like, is that the thing that usually gets in people's way? Is like, I don't know if I want to be that vulnerable and share my story, or I'm just
Because
curious.
it goes that that fear
Yeah.
about being vulnerable. Ultimately, there's a layer deeper than that, which is I'm not enough.
Mm,
I'm not
yeah.
lovable.
Yes.
I'm afraid to be fully seen for who I actually am, for fear of rejection, which oftentimes relates, not to get terribly psychological here, but relates back to childhood,
Yeah, of
to
course.
traumas, to
Yeah.
all of that. And, for me, I sort of took a reverse course in that those childhood traumas and those wounds that were fairly severe, to be honest, some serious abuse,
Yeah.
I went the other direction and became the best boy in the entire world. And so part of my success has been in the fuel of I'm going to prove it to them.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me up till that 37 when I got that award, the trophy, to then break it back down and to get into the real truth of who I am and be able to share from that place rather than from just a covered place, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Now I really want to go down this avenue, and I'm gonna bring it back because I feel like I might have to ask if you're willing at some point to bring you back on so we can talk more about that. And the reason I say that is because one of the pieces of feedback that I have gotten, and I never like I feel like I kind of understand what somebody's saying, but I find it extremely frustrating because there's a deep part of me that doesn't get it. Is I've had a coach, and I've had a couple people say it, but one coach put it the most succinctly. She said, "You spend so much time in your head and you need to get into your heart."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I hate that feedback. I know it's true. I hate it
Mm-hmm.
so much.
Yeah, I get that, but that means you're a smart human.
Okay, I'll take that.
You
I'll
know,
take that.
the smarter you are, the more you're in your head.
Yeah,
And,
okay.
but there is a direct connection from the head to the heart.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be and. Either or. It's yes and.
Yes. There's that might be my block, right? Is what's the blockage between the head and the heart? But anyway, not about me. Okay, we're going to go back to this idea of the topic of how do you merge multiple passions into one business concept and really build. I mean, what you have done is so incredible. You've built this incredible business. So my first question is, if I was going to stand in for you for a day, if I was so lucky I got to be you, how would I have to show up? How would I have to think, behave, act in order to just be you for that day with this idea of I can take my multiple passions and I can really present them into one business concept?
So the first thing I would say is you have to ground. Each day I get up and I do what I call a sadhana practice, which is meditation, a bit of movement, yoga, some breath work, so that I can really ground. Because one of the things that when you're a multi-passionate human being and a multi-hyphenate creative is that you have lots of balls in the air, right? There's a lot to juggle. And if you aren't completely grounded in your body, within yourself, then you're going to be throwing balls and they're going to be landing all over the place and you're not going to be able to catch them. So by really digging in and knowing the self, that's first and foremost for me, of really knowing who you are so that you can show up in the most authentic version of yourself, the most aligned version of yourself, and sort of the best version of yourself. That would be the first thing that I would say. The second is, put your pants on, because your big boy pants on, because you're going to have a lot coming at you during a day. Multitasking. And the thing about multitasking is that doesn't mean do 5,000 things It means do one thing, complete it, go to the next thing. That it's going to be from various avenues. And in my business, I have teams. I don't have a team. Each project has a project-based team. So being able to facilitate and manage teams, plural, is important. And showing up as that embodied leader is vital.
Say more about the embodied leader. Is that where you're talking about the grounding?
Yeah, that is grounding. That is also empowering. It's empowering everyone to greatness. If you can be the one who helps somebody become that greater version of themselves while they're working with you, it shifts everything for your business, for the team itself, for the project, for whatever it is that they're working on. And because when they shift, it lifts up the energy of the entire company.
That is so brilliant. So many good things that you gave us. This idea of showing up first and ground yourself. So having a routine, something that you follow, and that the importance of really knowing yourself, which I think is a lifelong journey. Would you agree that it's a lifelong journey?
Oh my gosh, yes. There's no magic bullet. There's no magic pill to say, okay, ding, now you know yourself completely. We're ever evolving.
Yeah.
We're the flower, the lotus flower that keeps blossoming and blooming. And sometimes parts of us die away like a plant, and then it regenerates in a new and more empowered way. And so because we're constantly changing, like the seasons, like the flower, we're constantly blooming new buds. We can't know ourselves fully. We can look back at our past, which is sometimes very, very helpful.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's not, right? And discerning when it is helpful and when it's not is important. But each day, new things are thrown at us and our reactions to it are going to shift. But the more that you can get to know that bulb at the center of the flower, that nectar, that juice right there at the center of your being, the more you can understand and know what that is, you'll know when that external stimulus, the rain, the ridiculous sunshine and heat, whatever it is coming at you, you'll know how to handle it, just like the flower does. The flower knows when to close up, when to fully open. It knows how to protect itself naturally because it knows itself. And so the more that you can know yourself, the more you can react to this stimulus.
I feel like that was just a little masterclass right there. That was so brilliant what you just said. This idea of really knowing yourself and being able to, because when you know that center of you, who you really are, you know, like how to maybe create some boundaries so you can protect, and when to really like let yourself shine and be the center. And oh gosh, I don't mean to add words into your mouth because the way you said it was way better.
No, I didn't add that. I love that boundaries part you put in there. That's awesome. Yes.
I think because I think about boundaries a lot. Like, I got to have some boundaries because if people can run amok in your brain and in your thoughts when you don't have boundaries. Sometimes it's you, but sometimes it's letting other people in there.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like this idea of big boy pants that, you take one thing, you complete it, you move on to the next. This idea of teams for a project, and then really being the embodied leader, somebody who is empowering everybody to their greatness so that we're all moving in the same direction and everybody gets to shine and be their best self. I love that.
When I was at the theater, I used to say in Oklahoma City, I used to say, if I have to show up, meaning if I need to come and intervene in something, I haven't done my job. Because the team should be able to run the show without me. I needed to almost be a figurehead within the business. And they needed to be so empowered in their position and feel so like they could make decisions and make mistakes as well as triumphs, and give them the space that they needed to make those mistakes. That's not always easy, right? To sit back because you want to be like the parent that's like, no. Don't touch the hot burner. Don't do that. Don't do that. But you need to let them get burned sometimes
Yeah.
in order for them to grow and for them to be empowered in their position. And so I would say, oh, if I need to show up, then I haven't done my job.
That is really good too. This is so interesting, the stuff that you're sharing about teams specifically, because yeah, there are just so many good nuggets there. This idea of like being the figurehead, that your people need to be empowered to make decisions, and also mistakes. I love that you put those two things together, because if you have to be the person who's making every decision all the time, how exhausting is that?
You'd have decision fatigue.
Yeah, which most of us do anyway, they say.
Yeah.
Right.
Just by living in the world we live in now, it's
Right.
decision fatigue, right?
Yeah.
But if you're running multiple and a multi-passionate and a multi-hyphenate business,
Yeah.
there's so many decisions that have to be made, and you can't be the one in the weeds making every decision, or you can't be that flower that's there in that center growing and budding, because it is your job as the leader of the business to be slightly, and doesn't need to be in a huge way, but slightly ahead of your team. And that doesn't mean you don't include them in all of it, but as the visionary, it's your job to shine.
Mm-hmm. I love that so much. Okay, so my next question is, what are your goals when it comes to this idea of having a business that has multiple passions that are merged into one concept? What are your goals around the business that way?
Wow. Okay. So I want to make it very clear that it's taking me many years to be able to find way to merge these together. I tried for many years, and it not a failure, but it was just not sort of, because I don't believe in failure. I only believe in opportunity, and I only believe in lessons, and I only believe in being shown the path. Because each step of the way, I had to learn something in order
Mm-hmm.
for them to be able to merge together. And the goal ultimately has always been for it to be a media empire, basically,
Mm-hmm.
and have different wings. Um, and education has always been such an important part of it for me, because I'm a learner. I'm a constant student, and I like to learn something till I master it, and then go on to the next thing. And so part of the business, part of the goal of the business, is for that journey to be a part of the business, that it's not a destination goal, that the education, that learning, that and again, I think that goes back in many ways to the self, of of the growth of the self is part of the business.
So powerful. So one of the things I just want to comment on, and I'd love your response to it, is you said each step of the way you learned something. And the piece that I want to comment on is that implies that you took multiple steps. It wasn't, like you said, this wasn't just an overnight, like, oh, I got it, easy peasy.
Yeah.
But you had to actually take steps, which means taking risk, being willing for things to maybe not go as planned, look for the lesson, and then keep going to the next step.
Yeah. So when a baby starts to take steps, they stand, right? And they
Yeah.
start to take that first step. And when they take that first step, what do? We say, oh my goodness, we give them applause. We say, oh, you're taking the step, you're taking the step, take another, and they fall down. And then they get back up and they take another step and they take another step. And we applaud. What we often do as adults is we take that baby step and we say, that wasn't good enough.
I just
We
got
don't
chills
applaud
again.
ourselves. We don't applaud. We don't encourage. We're like, that wasn't a big enough step. I didn't take a big enough leap. I'm not any good. I'm not going to do this again. Or we fail, quote unquote,
Right.
fail.
Yeah.
We fall down. And rather than like a baby who just is like, whatever, I'm going to take it again. I'm going to take another step and I'm going to get more applause. We say, I'm not good enough. I'm never going to be able to do this. And so we don't take that step. But if you can learn that the risk is only in taking the smallest next step, and that it's okay to fall backward, because sometimes you got to learn that you have to fall on your patootie to understand what the grounding is, or what the leg is, or what the lesson is, or whatever. You need it. That baby needs to fall backwards to even understand where their center of gravity or balance is.
I love that. It's the, I don't know if you know this quote. Somebody said, I say it all the time because I think of this woman who sat across from me one time when I was just starting out my business. And I think I asked her for like a piece of advice, about building a business. And she said, Nikki, it is a long, hard road to be an overnight success.
Oh, so true.
I was like, yeah, I know. And it's funny because I do think at times people will comment of like, wow, look at what you've done. And oh gosh, it must, it just seems so fast for you. And I'm like, are you kidding? I've been trudging through mud. Like this has been a painful process to even get to this place where you're like, wow, it looks so, you make it look so easy. Like what?
Yeah, I think that's sometimes because, going to that idea of story, we don't always, and myself included, always share the parts that aren't pretty.
Mm-hmm.
People see the prettiness. People see things like the Tony Award on my shelf. What they don't know is that in addition to that Tony Award, I've also produced flops. I've produced more flops than I have successes. Only in that industry, for example, only 20% of Broadway shows are hits. 80% are flops. So 8 out of 10 times in that industry, you fail. So I have failed so many times. And yet, people only like to look at or talk about the successes, myself included. I led the bio with, he's a Tony Award winning Broadway producer. I didn't write, he's an 8-time loser, right? But that's actually the truth, is that I've had way more failures than successes. I don't talk about the book that I wrote that never ended up getting published because of lots of legal issues. I don't talk about the app that I had that failed miserably. Those are the things that were lessons, those lessons for me on the path. And I needed those lessons in order for the successes to actually happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
They taught me things. They taught me about contracts, for instance, going to the legal thing, There were lessons that I needed on the path.
Yeah. Oh, so much goodness in that too. Thank you. I love how you talked about this, because it's all truth, right? Like, yes, you are a Tony Award winner, and yes, you've had flops. Okay. And you keep taking steps. And because you keep taking steps, you have built, hopefully, I mean, this is my words, not necessarily yours, but hopefully you've built this incredible business that you feel passionate about, because it's a mixture, it's a combination of all of your brilliant skill set and your passions.
I think that's one of the great things about your own business, is that it's a do-it-yourself adventure. You remember those adventure books? And it was like, you're a kid, and it was like, go to page 43. And I would be like, oh, 43, what's that 43? And you can go back and forth and you get to make it your own. But that does happen by taking steps.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're going to go off on a path that is, you're going to take those small steps or even big leaps, and you're going to go onto a path that is totally wrong. But you have this thing called the inner GPS. And what happens is, in that inner GPS, eventually you're going to get to where you need to go. You may take a round the way and you got to learn a lot and you got to get into the weeds. But eventually that GPS, that intuitive GPS is going to get you there. Just like in your car, you go off and it'll say, turn left, right? And you go right. And then it auto corrects you. And it's the same with this. As long as you keep taking the steps, that's really what it's about.
Yeah. If you just pull over the side of the road, you're never going to get there.
No.
Like that's it. Right. Like there's another quote about like, there's a lot of parking spaces on the way to success or something. I'm not saying it right,
like
but
that.
Something about that. There's a lot of parking spaces on the way to, or on the road to success, which probably makes more sense now.
Well, because rest is important.
Yeah.
Rest is part of your work. I think that's
Agree.
really important that, you can't constantly be going. It can't constantly be steps. Sometimes you need to fall back like the child to sit for a moment. Because we think of often, I just posted this the other day, we think of rest as an expense, but it's actually an investment.
I like that reframe.
Because you're investing in you.
Yes.
And there's no way that you could be clear and make really great decisions if you were in constant go mode, because you don't have the time or the space to sit back and view the entire picture. When you're the little dot in it, when you're in it's like the fish in the fish bowl, you don't even realize you're the fish in the bowl. You know what I mean? When you're in something so tight, you can't see. So sometimes when you take rest, you actually take some time away, the world expands. And you can see things so much clearer, and you become a clear channel ultimately to be able to serve people. Yeah.
That's so good. All right. So we talked, so I started a little bit about your goals. That was kind of the real NLP question of where I was going with this. And then we went a lot of places. So back to this idea of like your goals and, this idea of this journey and taking the steps and taking the risk. How do you know that you're achieving a goal, or what lets you, what's the indicator for you? Like, okay, I'm on track, or I've achieved something in regards to this business that you've built, this multiple passions into your business.
How do you feel today?
Say more.
It's become less about the external.
Okay.
Right. So because I have been what people will call a high achiever, right? Because I've had that experience. And what the story that I didn't tell you about the Tony Awards was that at the Tony Awards, I was sitting in the audience, and Bernadette Peters opened the envelope to name the musical, the best musical of the year. And I'm sitting there. She opens the envelope. She says Memphis. And there's this amazing CBS still of me. I stand up, and the people in the producing team are hugging each other and excited. And there is this still of me where I have a deadpan expression. And I remember this moment. That's what's so crazy about it. I remember the moment, because in the moment, was my thought pattern. Oh, thank goodness. Now my investors are going to get their money back. They're going to get paid. And that was first thought. And the second thought was, this is it. This is it. This is this moment. This is how this is going to feel. This isn't how I thought this was going to feel. As I'm walking up onto the stage, it's a very surreal experience. It was, this is not how I thought this was going to feel. And I was very numb. And that, when I said the real work began, that's what I was talking about, because it wasn't in this feeling place. Externally, I was getting lots of validation in that moment.
Yes.
But internally, I was very unhappy. And so I know now that the goal can't be the external. The goal has to be, how am I feeling today? Where am I at today? And if I'm not on the path, and that doesn't mean I don't have bad days. Please do not get me wrong. Of course, everyone, and no matter what the business is, you're not happy 100% of the time. But there's this level of contentment, which is a very different thing than happiness, because happiness is fleeting. So I can be happy and sad within 15 minutes of each other very easily, depending on what's going on, right? But this level of contentment, or this level of joy for the work. And so how am I feeling today is really the goal. How am I feeling the way I want to feel?
I like this idea of contentment. I use, for me, the word that I often use is, do I feel satisfied? Do I feel satisfied at the end of my day that I did, I did make a contribution, I did make an impact.
Yeah.
And can I say I'm satisfied? And sometimes that has to be enough.
Yeah.
So I love that contentment for you. Yeah, so good. Okay, so if you feel like you're not reaching your goals, what do you do to get yourself to course correct?
It's funny that I mentioned the rest thing, because that is vital when you have a multi-passionate, multi-pronged business with lots of things happening. I have had periods where I get overwhelmed or depleted. And so learning to take that time out for the self is so important, because I have a deep desire to serve people fully.
Yeah.
100% of myself and the team and of what we have to offer. But if I'm not at 100%, then that can't happen. So that morning practice, going back to that, is really important, because it fills that cup every day in like a sustainable way over time. And also taking the time out to then look and say, okay, if I'm not feeling this, why? Asking myself the important questions and then listening. And sometimes they come quickly, and sometimes it takes some time. And that course correction is not overnight. And being okay with that. It's really about learning to be. And I think the pandemic, shifted some things here for people, where I think a lot of people had to learn to be uncomfortable. And sometimes it's about learning to be comfortable in the uncomfortability of sitting in the question and allowing yourself the process of the questioning.
My NLP teacher used to always say, the only person who likes change is a wet baby. That always made me laugh.
Oh, that's really good. That's really good. I like that.
Because change it's not comfortable typically, but are you willing to be a little uncomfortable to push through to the next step to reach the goal?
Yeah. And that's a practice.
Yeah.
It's like a muscle. Just like risk is a muscle. It's very similar. Being uncomfortable. And that's where for me, that meditation practice comes in, or the breathwork practice comes in, or in even yoga, you twist yourself in these incredibly uncomfortable positions, and you learn to breathe within them. And it's the same, and it's the metaphor really for your life. Putting yourself in these really uncomfortable, twisted positions, things that stretch you, that move you outside of your comfort zone, because as we know, the old saying, everything you want's outside of that comfort zone, right? Yes. On the other side of it.
Yes.
So by practicing, you get more comfortable taking the bigger step, or the bigger leap, or the bigger risk. And over time, you learn that the uncomfortability is a really good thing. It's really where the juice is. It's really sweet, and it's really awful when you're going through it. It's so awful, but just on the other side of that, generally
Yeah.
what happens is some level of quantum growth.
I love how you spoke about this idea of like learning how to truly breathe in the moments of uncomfortability. I'm not saying that right. This last summer, I got asked to speak for an organization. They brought in like their big mastermind group, and they brought in some of us as speakers. But this organization, one of the things that they did is they actually had like a speaker who spoke to us about how to breathe through being uncomfortable, and the experience that they gave us so that we could use the techniques that he taught us about breathing was to sit in an ice bath for a minimum of 2 minutes. And they were like, "You're going to do this, right, Nikki?" And I was like, Heck no. First of all, I'm not gonna get in a bathing suit in front of a bunch of people that I don't know that are here. Like, I'm supposed to be the credible speaker, so no. But they were like, they really were encouraging in a positive way. So I ended up like, okay, I'm gonna say yes, because they're like, you're gonna like, you wanna do this. And I remember like they actually had the guy who was teaching us about breathing. He got right up on like it was this huge bucket that you had to like dunk yourself into. He got right up there with me. There's actually pictures of it. And he's walking me through, like, catching my breath, because the first thing that happens is you kinda lose your breath, and learning how to, like, get it back so that I could sit in the ice for 2 minutes. I actually stayed in for 3, and he was like, once I got my breathing, he's like, "Don't call her out at 2, call her out at 3 minutes. She's gonna make 3 minutes." Now, super uncomfortable, super painful. Am I so glad I did it? Because now I know in those moments where I feel uncomfortable, I gotta catch my breath.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
how you said that.
That's a great story too. Really.
It was a
We
good
take 21,600 breaths per day,
how many?
15 21,600 breaths on average per day, 15 breaths per minute. The ancient yogis believed that the fewer breaths that you took, the longer you lived. And so they would do these patterns of holding the breath. That's why, you do these breathing holds in pranayama. But if you think about it, what they were actually saying was that it extends your life. Because what are you doing? You're regulating your nervous system. Where does dis-ease in the body come from? Where does all that come from? It comes from the dysregulation of your emotions. The anxiety and stress are the number one killers. So if you can
Mhm.
learn, because of it turns into heart disease, it turns into all of these problems, right? So if you can learn to control your breath, you can learn to master your thoughts and thinking, but therefore you can learn to master your body, and so on and so on and so on.
And it all goes then from there, you can master your multiple passions and bring it into
Totally.
your business. Like, all of it is connected. I love the way you broke it down. Thank you so very much. I have found incredible insight from this conversation that you've shared. I've taken lots of notes. I'm hoping the listeners did as well. This was so fantastic. Thank you for sharing so candidly. I think you really did give some very tangible takeaways, the things that people can be implementing into their own life and business. And I mean, just at the end there, this whole idea of like really learning how to breathe through the uncomfortableness and what that will mean for you, extending your life, being able to hold your breath, and so many good things. Okay, so as we start to wrap up, I really could sit and talk to you for hours, and I want to be super respectful of your time. So here's one of my little something extra questions for you, if you're willing to answer, is what's something that brings you pleasure and or joy?
Dancing. Dancing
Oh,
brings me so much pleasure, so much joy. And of course, I think because I've done it since I was a child, you know, uh, professionally, it was not as joyful for me, interestingly.
hmm,
And I think that part of that was because it suddenly became the work and
yeah.
became about, again, about external validation, became
Mm,
about needing to get the job. And it sucked it away, that joy away from me. And I didn't dance for many years after. And then I started one day just like freestyle dancing, and then it became a whole thing, and now I love doing it on TikTok. Like when that TikTok thing, I was like, oh, I'm in. It was very fun for me, and it brings me joy. I do it between clients, I do it between meetings because it just lifts my spirit and my energy.
I love that so much. Okay, what is something that people would be surprised to learn about you? I feel like you've shared so candidly, but I know that there's a whole bunch more.
Okay, I have a guilty pleasure. How about
Oh,
that?
tell us. Yes.
I've watched General Hospital for over 25 years. It's like I turn my brain off. And
Yeah.
because I got so much going on, right? Like sometimes you
Yeah.
just want to like turn it off. And I flip on the TV and I watch these stories of Luke and Laura and, from the 80s and all of that.
Yes.
Like, I still watch it. It went out of fashion years and years ago. And you wonder, like, who watches that? Me. I'm the one.
You're the one. I have a girlfriend that watches is it People's Court? Like it was and same thing, kind of like it's like her guilty pleasure. She loves People's Court. And it's funny to me, but I love that yours is I love that you shared that that's yours. And I actually stopped asking people what their guilty pleasure is because when I was doing it, I felt like I was throwing people like it was almost like that's an uncomfortable question for you to ask me. So the fact that you came back with like, let me tell you my guilty pleasure, it delights me in a way that I can't even express. Thank you.
Oh gosh, you're welcome. You're welcome.
Okay, two more little questions here for you. What's something exciting going on in your business right now?
Okay, something that's super, super exciting is
Yeah.
that next week, next Friday, is the premiere of the documentary that I directed and produced in New York City at Tribeca Studios. And it goes on demand immediately everywhere. And this is a project that has been a 7.5 year project. I spent 2 years following people. We spent a couple years in fundraising, a couple years in uh, development, a couple years in edit process. It's just a little over 7 years from beginning to end, and it happens next Friday. That's huge.
So how do we get to watch it and what's that? Will you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the film is about fibromyalgia, which is a chronic pain syndrome.
Yeah.
And my mother has fibromyalgia. And so I wanted to dive in to help her uh, learn more. It's typically considered a female disease, female syndrome, rather. 80% of people with fibromyalgia reported with fibromyalgia are female. It does have a
Okay.
genetic component, however. And spoiler alert, as we were making the film, I began to question if I had it,
Oh,
because there is a genetic component.
okay.
And I experienced many of the symptoms, but I had been managing them without realizing that that's what I was doing. So the film took a drastic turn, and it's part of the reason it took 7 years. And it will premiere next Friday, like I said, on Vimeo on demand. I can give you the information so you can put it
Yeah,
out for
we'll
your
put it in the
people.
show notes. Yeah,
The
for
trailer,
sure.
a link to the trailer
Okay.
um, as well. So it's really, really exciting. And it's really was created by, for, and with the fibromyalgia community, which is there's a tight-knit group of people out there. If you have fibromyalgia and are suffering, there's a tight-knit group of people that are there willing to help you. I met they call themselves fibro warriors, some incredible human beings that are really fighting this fight because it's an invisible illness. You'll look at somebody and they look completely normal
Hmm.
on the outside, but they are struggling with chronic pain.
Yeah.
And part of the problem is that when you are diagnosed, which can take a long time, and lots of people are not believed, people don't believe them. When you are diagnosed, they basically hand you some painkillers and say, good luck.
Oh,
We don't know what to
goodness.
do for you. Here's some painkillers, and give you
Helpful.
very
Yeah.
little to no resources. So The film,
Wow.
the first film of its kind. There's never been a film about fibromyalgia before. And so I'm really honored to be able to share the stories of the community.
That's amazing. And congratulations on the completion and that it is going to be available for people to benefit from.
Yeah.
What a huge impact that you will, I'm sure you already have made, but a bigger impact that you will make in the world as a result of you bringing this passion to your work.
Thank you. That is really truly, when you say what are one of your goals, right? Or what are some of your goals? Part of that impact thing, that monumental impact is, for me, it's 108 million stories told. Telling 108 million stories. And that's gonna be little stories like I've told today, all the way to the big stories. But each day sharing people's stories, not just mine, but the people of our community, of our world, and helping people with their internal as well as their external stories.
Yes. Oh, you give me the chills when you speak because it's so deep, it's so meaningful, and I'm just so happy that I know you. One last question, because I know people listening are going to want to connect with you. What's the best way to do that?
Okay. Thank you, Nikki, for having me, first of all, on your show. I know that, you have to really take into consideration who you bring into your world, right? Who you share with your audience. And so I
Yeah.
really want to say thank you and honor you for bringing me into your space and into your community.
Thank you.
You can reach me at the Nick Demos, the Nick, NICKDEMOS, on all the socials, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and that is my website as well. It's thenickdemos.com.
Yeah. Make sure you connect with him, follow him. If you're a TikTok person, which I'm not, but if you are, I'm sure, because I know just from the stuff that you post on Instagram, it delights me. So I think you'll find him as delightful as I do. For you, the listener, thank you so much for showing up and being a part of this conversation. I'd love to hear what your biggest takeaway is. And if you feel inclined to tag me and Nick on social media, please give him some love and appreciation for all that he has shared today. That would mean the world to me and maybe mean something to him as well. So please take the time to do that. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to the show. And I wish you continued success in all that you do.
Thanks for listening to Sales Maven. Visit us online at yoursalesmaven.com/maven for more resources to boost your confidence and skills.